Hey everybody on YouTube, we are starting the streaming right now again for the next session. I'd like to ask some patience. We'll start in 2 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Ja. Sollten wir vielleicht dann einschreiten quasi. Okay, Peter, we are ready if you are.
Yes, live stream is on, recording is on, our session host is here with us. So hello everybody once again, and have a great time with Matthias and his session about, I have to read, oh God, about open source and freedom, love, and our contribution. Welcome, Matthias, your turn.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So today we are going to talk about open source. And open source, what does it mean? What does it mean to be in an open source community? What does it bring with it? We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about freedom. We're going to talk about contribution, and we're going to put all of those into some kind of system. But first, before we look at the system, we're going to look at me. This is me. I'm Mathias Lesniak. I live at a place called Nesodden, just outside of Oslo in Norway. And there I have a wife and kids, not pictured here. I work with TYPO3. I've done that since 2003 when I crashed my first TYPO3 installation. I renamed the TYPO3 directory, and that wasn't a very good idea. Since then, I've become a board member of the TYPO3 Association. And when I don't do that, I work for Pixelant with making and breaking TYPO3 websites. But what am I going to talk to you about really today? That is really about the human side of the open source community. And you can disagree with me, you can agree with me as much as you want. These are my thoughts, these are my philosophies, but I think that we all find that open source is probably something more than just the code. today everyone uses open source, but very few people are actually aware that they're using it. I mean, every web user out there uses open source in some way. They touch upon it every single day and they don't know it. So we actually need to talk about open source, because otherwise being involved in open source is going to feel a little bit strange. But yeah, open source is a group exercise, but very often it is just lonely. It feels lonely. It's just some person sitting and coding, and you don't really feel that you're part of something larger. But you really are. We need to talk about open source, and we're actually good at that in the TYPO3 community. We talk about TYPO3 every day, and we actually put it on our websites. Let's just have a very quick look here. You know, this is the first 15 lines of the website typo3.org. And during those first 15 lines, we actually talk about open source. We talk about what it is and that you can contribute and that people work with it. And actually that we put this statement in every TYPO3 website there is actually raising eyebrows in other communities, because being so open, so speaking so much about open source and really showing it on every website, making it a requirement, is not something others do. Take a little look at the first 15 lines of WordPress.org, for example. There is nothing there about open source. The same thing with Drupal.org. There is nothing there either about open source, really. And that is very interesting, but it means that we actually have a really great open source tradition in our community, which we need to carry forward. And of course, every community says that it's the best. And you can ask, you know, Drupal or WordPress, and they will say that they are the best. But in the TYPO3 community, we actually have some things that I think we should be especially proud of. And those things are, for example, that we have a flatter organizational structure. We have fewer paywalls. And we have no active founder, which is actually really special because most others have that. We don't have this grand old man who can go through back channels or decide things because he's the one who started everything. We don't have that. And that means that we can act more freely in our work with open source. Well, of course, it doesn't make other open source projects less open source, but it does add another dimension that we have these things. And working with open source and spreading information about open source isn't just about saying open source all the time. That doesn't really create a healthy community. That's not enough. We need more. And open source is really a new paradigm. It is a really different way of thinking to what we're used to. It's not the way of thinking that we're taught in school. And just look at, you know, how the traditional economy works today and how it's worked for hundreds of years. You know, you have an exchange. Let's say you build a website, you know, you're not going to say no to the client's money. You're sort of exchanging a new website against money from your client. And it goes down to the very, very basics of, you know, I have an orange and you have an apple. I want the apple more than you want. Well, you understand? We just swap things because one thing is worth more to us than it is to the other. And then the other gets the money or whatever it is we give back to them. And that's a type of exchange. And that exchange is not there in open source. which means that it is really hard to understand in some way. But instead, we're actually building something much, much more valuable when we're working with open source. We're building trust in the human being. We're building trust in that it's possible to participate and that people, each individual, can take charge. If you look at it on the surface, open source is just giving away. Like we do at Pixelant, we give away our sort of magic sauce with the site building kit, T3 kit, for example. That is stuff that other businesses would normally hold close to their chest and say that, well, this is secret because it's what we earn money from. Well, with open source, we're getting back much more than just money. We're getting back something much more valuable. So let's just think about it. When you give away code or whatever you give away that's open source, well, when we give away TYPO3, we give it away with the GPL license, the general public license. And that license has a very important pillar, which is called freedom. You're actually giving away freedom to the person that you're giving away your code to. That's why we don't only call it open source, we call it free and open source, because not every open source project is actually free. Well, free does not mean no cost necessarily. You can pay for downloading, you know, the enablement of making it possible to distribute the open source project. But you don't pay for the project. It's not like you pay a sum of money and you get one item. What you get, you can give away to anybody else and they can give it on after that. So payment is not a requirement of the process in open source. What you're giving away together with your free and open source software is also the freedom from payment, and through that also a freedom from debt. So let's look at that. Let's say that you have a friend. This is a friend, and this friend has a pickup. And I've got a huge tree that I've chopped down somewhere on some land that I own, but I don't own a pickup. I need to get this stuff to where I live. So I ask my friend, can I use your pickup? And the friend says, sure, I'll drive it for you. I say, okay, I'll pay the petrol for you, and we're friends. That's what you do with friends, isn't it? You might pay for, you know, the petrol that the friend has spent driving your stuff, but you wouldn't pay your friend per hour. That's not a friendship. That's not what a friendship is about. And it's not what your friend expects. Your friend expects absolutely nothing back from you, which is sort of what makes friendships so great. Friendships are acts of love. It's not the kissing, it's not the marriage thing. English is a bit limited in that way, but it is giving a gift to the world, or giving a gift with absolutely no strings attached. Code with no strings attached. It's the perfect gift that you're giving away. You're not just giving away something like a parcel. You're actually giving away the greatest gift that you can ever give someone. Ultimate freedom. The freedom to make choices on your own. Naturally, you can come in there and you can say, the morale says that you should give back. But no. That is really not the way of doing it. When you moralize about freedom, you're very close to asking someone to remove that freedom, because you're putting a limitation on the freedom, and that's, of course, the opposite of freedom. But if we say that open source is an act of giving. Let's just accept that, okay? Then it's a type of giving where we have no accounting. You don't have a friendship where you count favors, do you? I hope you don't, because it sort of does something to the friendship. It's not a friendship anymore. But how can the system survive in that case if we just give away? And the problem, of course, is that the giver would get nothing, isn't it? Well, open source requires a very different approach to that whole question. Well, let's look at what happens when an open source project first comes online. Something really amazing happens. There's real magic. What was dead comes alive. People pick it up. People start working on it. It starts spreading. Something happens. The dead project that you were working on gets a life of its own. This is no zombie story. It's no Frankenstein's monster. What really happens is this stuff from the fairy tales, you know, Pinocchio or the gingerbread man. Someone who, you know, parents who have for some reason not been able to have a child, they really wish for it and they make some kind of ersatz like a gingerbread boy. And magic happens and the gingerbread boy rises up and is alive, just like your code when you publish it open source. But like us, like in the fairy tale, it doesn't just get a life of its own. It also gets a mind of its own. There's contributions, there's contributors, there's opinions, and there's thoughts, and there's all of these kind of things. But luckily, everyone's really striving towards the same goal, making the software better. You're no longer a vendor just supplying a product. You're creating an open source community. There is really no buyer and seller anymore. Everyone can make their own version of the software. And open source really only works when we collaborate. It's like a big dinner party. Just imagine a dinner party with a huge bowl that everyone's eating from, and the worst thing that could happen is that somebody brings a fork, right? Because we don't want the fork to happen. We want to collaborate. So community is very different from selling a product. It's less authoritarian, it's more pluralist, and it is actually a really important and fundamental lesson in democracy. Open source and democracy are connected. They are both about making free choices, about using your freedom. But that also requires good information. So TYPO3, I said that we do this really well, I think, at least to a certain extent. We contribute through the TYPO3 project to democracy building, what the Community Expansion Committee has done, helping teach IT people how to use TYPO3 in Rwanda, building TYPO3 expertise there. It's not only the expertise part that's happening. We're also building a local free open source community. And of course, many companies invest in developing countries and they label it as aid. But very often what you'll see is that they are trying to find ground for their product in a different way to what we're doing. They're giving the vendor lock-in. They're coming with the license fees. And what they're selling is proprietary, it's commercial. And what happens if you get a financial tie to something? you lose your financial independence. And by losing your financial independence, you also can lose your political independence, right? We can throw things at other people and expect them to give something back, but it's not the way it's working, and that's not the way we're thinking with TYPO3. TYPO3 doesn't have any profit goal. There's no reason for TYPO3 to go somewhere to get money. The important thing for TYPO3 is, of course, to build independent local businesses, build competition to the closed source and proprietary vendors, and to build collaborative open source communities that can continue building both TYPO3 and other open source projects. And what's happening here is that we're actually, by creating communities, we're also building civil society. Civil society, you can Google it. It's one of the core things in growing democracy. So, TYPO3, I said it already, we do have a flatter structure than many others. We can still work on a lot of things, but we do not have a strong leader. Instead, we believe in the community, working together, building something together, having teams, committees, elections, collaboration sprints, and also people from the community help others come into it and become a part of that contribution. Now, if you're a user of open source, let's take a step back and think, what are most users of open source? Well, they're really blissfully ignorant of open source. Outside of the open source communities, the normal web browsers, the people you meet on the street, they're in this kind of blissful, beautiful ignorance, and there is nothing wrong about that. But you can't build an open source community or a democracy on ignorance. Open source also trains and develops free speech. And that's another democracy pillar that comes with open source. You have to dare to talk, you have to dare to participate, and you have to be allowed to do it. And in open source communities like ours, we have to show by doing. We have to show what we want our community to be. And we have to show that what we do is to talk things up, use positive reinforcement. Because it's very easy to say what we're not. But how will that help us? Should we talk down WordPress or Drupal? No. There are a lot of good things in those communities, good things that we can learn. And we have to focus on the sides that we want to strengthen together. What are the good sides to build on? What can we learn from others? Because open source means open doors as well. Open information and open conversation. It is a key to growing a prospering open source community and a community anywhere. And what helps us there most is this freedom and the free, as in freedom, open speech. The freedom to say what you mean and what you feel. Well, one last thing about freedom here. Just like as in democracy, freedom must be wielded responsibly. In democracy, it's easy to talk about your rights. I have the right to vote, or I have the right to be treated as an adult human being, those kind of things. Very easy to say. But what about the responsibility to participate in the democracy, or the responsibility to act as an adult human being? That's more difficult because it asks something from me, from you, from everyone. We are all responsible for our open source project and that it works. We have to collaborate. It's not something we can put away. And we have to make sure that the decisions we make are the best decisions for everyone. So freedom on one side and responsibility on the other. Those are real keys. So you don't only have to be informed. You also have to see your own role in shaping what you're being a part of. There are a lot of ways to give back to open source, but truly nobody can actually go and tell you what's right for you. It's not maybe even possible for you to give anything back right now, and that has to be allowed. That has to be acceptable. But our responsibility as an open source community is to make sure that everybody knows how open source works. Building a community, a colorful community together, and building trust and freedom and responsibility. We have to talk about open source so it doesn't become a fringe concept anymore. We have to use open source to guide the development. And we have to use open source because it has the potential to be a really positive force in the development of the world outside of our project as well. Building fair, free, and democratic societies, as well as an excellent, wonderful, and lovable CMS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mathias. And I want to ask everybody here in the Zoom, do you have any questions? If not, I want to ask Vienna, are there any questions in Vienna?
Hello, Matthias. Thank you very much. This was an enthusiastic and motivation session for our TYPO3 open source product. So thank you very much. If I wasn't here in the TYPO3 community, that were the moment where I will join. Thank you very much. So I ask the audience, do we have questions here? Do you have something to ask or to say to this session? Okay, no questions, no comments. I try to give a big applause here. Maybe you can hear this. Thank you very much. It was really, really fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'll see you soon in a live physical situation. So thank you very much and bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. We will stop the YouTube streaming now once again, and we'll be online on YouTube again after the lunch break at about 20 minutes past 2. Also, we will stop the Zoom video conference call now for 15 minutes due to technical reasons for downloading the recordings of the sessions. So see you again. If you want to log in the Zoom, you'll find the Zoom link on the TYPO3 Camp website. Look on the sessions page. There is a section for the online sessions thingies, and you can log in again in about 15 minutes and join everybody who's remotely here and share your lunchtime together. Thank you very much. See you later.